What would you do if you discovered that your drink had been spiked by a wealthy predator, but the person who saved you was someone even more dangerous? Today, I'm going to tell you the incredible true story of Jessica Parker, a single mother working multiple jobs to support her 5-year-old daughter, who thought she was just serving at another upscale event. She had no idea that Lorenzo Santangelo, a 40-year-old Italian Mafia boss, was watching from across the room when he caught something that made his blood run cold. When Lorenzo saw what was happening, he moved with deadly precision, approached Jessica, and spoke 2 words that would save her life and change everything. Don't talk. What happened next involves predators in expensive suits, a protective Italian patriarch who lived by old-world honor codes, and a love story that proved sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is exactly the one you need. Jessica Parker balanced the silver tray carefully as she navigated through the crowd of wealthy guests at Romano's, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in Manhattan. At 29, she had perfected the art of invisible service, being present enough to anticipate needs, but discreet enough to avoid unwanted attention from men who thought money entitled them to more than just dinner service. Tonight's private event was exactly the kind of high-paying gig Jessica needed. The catering company had called her specifically because she was professional, experienced, and desperate enough to work the late shift that other servers avoided. With her 5-year-old daughter, Emma, sleeping at her neighbor Mrs. Chen's apartment, Jessica could focus entirely on earning the rent money she needed by tomorrow. The event was a celebration for Blackstone Investment Group, a private equity firm known for making billion-dollar deals and throwing parties that cost more than most people's annual salaries. The guests were exactly what Jessica expected. Older men in custom suits discussing deals over wine that cost more per bottle than Jessica made in a week, accompanied by women young enough to be their daughters, who laughed at jokes that weren't funny and agreed with opinions they clearly didn't share. Jessica had been working events like this for 3 years, ever since Emma's father David had decided that fatherhood was too restrictive and disappeared to find himself in Europe with his yoga instructor. The work was exhausting and sometimes demoralizing, but it paid well enough to keep Jessica and Emma in their small but clean apartment in Queens. As she refilled champagne glasses and collected empty plates, Jessica tried not to think about the electricity bill that was overdue, or the fact that Emma needed new shoes before school started next month. She focused instead on the generous tips these events usually generated, and the overtime pay that would help her catch up on expenses. "Miss, could I get another martini?" Jessica turned to see Richard Blackstone himself, the 60-something CEO whose company was hosting the event. He was distinguished-looking in the way that expensive health care and personal trainers could make any man appear, with silver hair and the kind of confident smile that came from never being told no. "Of course, Mr. Blackstone. Vodka martini, extra dry, 3 olives. You remembered. Impressive." Blackstone's smile was warm, but something about the way his eyes lingered on Jessica made her uncomfortable. "You're not like the usual servers they send. You're special." Jessica forced a professional smile. "Thank you, sir. I'll get that martini right away." As she moved toward the bar, Jessica felt Blackstone watching her. It wasn't unusual. Wealthy men at these events often treated servers like decoration, making comments or assumptions that Jessica had learned to ignore. But there was something different about Blackstone's attention, something that made her skin crawl in a way she couldn't quite identify. The bartender, a young Italian man named Marco who had been friendly throughout the evening, prepared Blackstone's martini with practiced efficiency. "Be careful with that one," Marco said quietly as he handed Jessica the drink. "I've worked a lot of these Blackstone events. He has a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" Marco glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "The kind where young women who work his parties sometimes can't remember how they got home, if you know what I mean." Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard rumors about certain wealthy clients, whispered warnings among the catering staff about men who thought their money could buy more than just service, but she had never experienced it directly. "Thanks for the warning," Jessica said, taking the martini. As she walked back toward Blackstone's table, Jessica became aware of another presence in the restaurant that she had been unconsciously avoiding all evening. In the back corner, at a table that seemed to command respect from the entire staff, sat a man who radiated a different kind of power than the investment bankers and hedge fund managers filling the room. Lorenzo Santangelo was probably around 40, with the kind of masculine presence that made people instinctively step aside when he passed. His dark hair was perfectly styled with just a touch of silver at the temples. His olive skin spoke of Mediterranean heritage, and his charcoal suit was tailored so perfectly it might as well have been painted on his body. But it was his eyes that had caught Jessica's attention earlier in the evening. Dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that suggested he saw everything while revealing nothing. Unlike the other guests, Lorenzo ate his meal with obvious appreciation, spoke to the waitstaff with courtesy that seemed genuine, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. Jessica had noticed that even the restaurant's management treated him with a deference that went beyond normal customer service. As she approached Blackstone's table, Jessica caught Lorenzo's eye briefly. He was watching the interaction with what looked like mild interest, though something in his expression suggested he was more alert than he appeared. "Here you go, Mr. Blackstone," Jessica said, setting down the martini. "Wonderful. You know, I've been thinking, you're clearly too intelligent to be just serving drinks. Have you ever considered other opportunities?" Jessica's professional smile faltered slightly. "I'm quite happy with my current work, thank you." "Are you sure?" "Because I could offer you something much more lucrative, something that would set you up financially for life." The way Blackstone said lucrative made Jessica's stomach turn. She had heard this kind of offer before, though never stated quite so directly. "That's very kind, but I'm not interested. Is there anything else I can get for you tonight?" Blackstone's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Think about it. I'll be here for another hour or so. There's no rush to decide." Jessica nodded and turned to leave, but Blackstone caught her wrist gently. Too gently, in a way that would look friendly to anyone watching, but felt controlling to Jessica. "Actually, why don't you take a quick break? You look tired. Have a drink with me." Before Jessica could respond, Blackstone was signaling to Marco, the bartender. "A champagne for the lady. The Dom Perignon." "Really, that's not necessary," Jessica started. "I insist. You've been working so hard all evening. The least I can do is offer you something special." Jessica felt trapped. Refusing a drink from the host of the event could cost her this job and future opportunities with the catering company. But accepting felt like crossing a line she didn't want to cross. "That's very generous," Jessica said carefully, "but I'm still on duty. Just one drink. I promise it will be worth your while." Marco appeared with a flute of champagne that probably cost more than Jessica's weekly grocery budget. As he set it down, he gave Jessica a look that seemed to carry a warning, but she couldn't refuse without making a scene. "Thank you," Jessica said, picking up the glass but not drinking. "To new opportunities," Blackstone said, raising his martini in a toast. Jessica was about to politely sip the champagne when a hand fell gently but firmly on her shoulder. "Don't talk." The voice was deep, accented with Italian inflections, and carried an authority that made Jessica freeze instantly. She turned to see Lorenzo Santangelo standing behind her, his dark eyes fixed on something that made his jaw clench with controlled fury. "Don't drink," Lorenzo continued, his voice still quiet but with an undertone that made the hair on Jessica's arm stand up. "And don't say anything until I tell you." Jessica followed Lorenzo's gaze and saw what he was looking at. Blackstone's face, which had gone pale with what looked like genuine fear. "Mr. Santangelo," Blackstone said, his voice lacking the confident tone he had used with Jessica. "I wasn't expecting to see you tonight." "Clearly," Lorenzo replied, his accent making the word sound like a blade. "Jessica, cara mia, please step back from the table." Jessica didn't know who Lorenzo was or why Blackstone seemed terrified of him, but every instinct told her to do exactly what Lorenzo said. She moved back, still holding the champagne flute. Lorenzo picked up a napkin from the table and gently took the champagne glass from Jessica's hand. Then, to her amazement, he dipped the corner of the napkin into the champagne and held it up to the light. "Rohypnol," Lorenzo said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Also known as the date rape drug. Colorless, odorless, and completely undetectable unless you know what to look for. Jessica's blood turned to ice. The champagne. Blackstone had insisted she drink the champagne, had been upset when she hesitated. "I don't know what you're implying," Blackstone started. "I am not implying anything," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice growing colder. "I am stating facts. You drugged this woman's drink with the intention of incapacitating her so you could assault her. I watched you slip the powder into the glass while Marco was distracted." Jessica felt the room spin around her. She had been seconds away from drinking that champagne, seconds away from becoming another victim of a predator who used his wealth and position to hurt vulnerable women. "That's a serious accusation," Blackstone said, but his voice was shaking now. "You can't prove—" Lorenzo pulled out his phone and showed Blackstone the screen. "Security cameras are wonderful things, no? Especially when you know which angles to watch and which footage to preserve." The blood drained completely from Blackstone's face, as he realized Lorenzo had video evidence of him drugging Jessica's drink. "Now," Lorenzo continued, his voice maintaining that deadly calm, "you are going to leave this restaurant immediately. You are going to close your account here and never return. You are going to cancel any future events your company has planned at any establishment I have an interest in. You can't dictate." And, Lorenzo continued as if Blackstone hadn't spoken, "you are going to transfer $50,000 to a charity that helps victims of sexual assault. Tonight. Within the hour." "That's extortion." Lorenzo smiled, but it was the most frightening expression Jessica had ever seen. "That is justice, Mr. Blackstone. Because if you prefer, we can discuss this matter with some of my associates who are less diplomatic than I am." Blackstone looked around the restaurant as if hoping for support, but Jessica noticed that the other guests were carefully avoiding eye contact. Whatever power Lorenzo wielded, it was clearly significant enough that no one wanted to cross him. "Fine," Blackstone said finally, "but this isn't over." "Yes, it is," Lorenzo said simply. "Because if you ever approach this woman again, if you ever attempt to harm another woman in my city, if I even hear your name associated with behavior like this, then you will discover that there are consequences that money cannot buy your way out of." Blackstone gathered his belongings and left without another word, followed by several of his associates who clearly wanted to distance themselves from whatever had just transpired. After they were gone, Lorenzo turned to Jessica, his expression softening from terrifying to concerned. "Are you all right, cara mia?" Jessica stared at him, trying to process what had just happened. You saved me. I could not stand by and watch a predator drug an innocent woman. But how did you know? How did you see what he was doing?" Lorenzo's smile became rueful. "In my line of work, you learn to watch for certain behaviors. Men like Blackstone, they think they are invisible because of their money and status. But I have been watching predators for many years." Jessica realized she was shaking, the full impact of what she had almost experienced hitting her all at once. "I could have, if you hadn't been there. But I was there. And you are safe." Jessica looked at Lorenzo, really looked at him, trying to understand who this man was and why he had intervened on behalf of a stranger. The expensive suit, the way the staff treated him, the obvious fear he had inspired in Blackstone. It all suggested someone with significant power and influence. "Who are you?" Jessica asked directly. Lorenzo studied her face for a moment. "I am someone who believes that women should be protected, not preyed upon. Someone who thinks that wealth and power should be used to help people, not harm them. It wasn't really an answer, and they both knew it. Jessica, right? Lorenzo continued. That is what Blackstone called you. Yes, Jessica Parker. It is a pleasure to meet you, Jessica Parker, even under these circumstances. I am Lorenzo Santangelo. The name meant nothing to Jessica, but she could see it meant something to the restaurant staff who were discreetly watching their interaction. Mr. Santangelo, I don't know how to thank you. No thanks are necessary, but I have a question, if you don't mind. Of course. Do you often work events like this? Private parties? Wealthy clients? Late hours? Jessica felt suddenly self-conscious. When I can get them. The pay is good, and I have responsibilities that require good pay. Children? Jessica nodded. A daughter, Emma. She's 5. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Not pity, but understanding, as if her situation had clarified something important for him. And you work alone at these events? No security? No protection? The catering company provides basic security, but... Jessica trailed off, realizing how inadequate that protection had proven to be. Jessica, what happened tonight was not random. Men like Blackstone, they target women they perceive as vulnerable, isolated, financially desperate. Women who work alone at late-night events, who cannot afford to make complaints that might cost them future employment. The truth of his words hit Jessica like a physical blow. She had been targeted specifically because she appeared vulnerable, because Blackstone had calculated that she would be unlikely to report assault and unable to fight back effectively. I need this job, Jessica said quietly. I can't afford to avoid these kinds of events. No, you cannot, but you also cannot afford to work them without protection. Lorenzo paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. I have a proposition for you if you are willing to hear it. Jessica felt a flutter of unease. Men who made propositions to women they had just rescued from other men were rarely offering anything innocent. What kind of proposition? I own several legitimate businesses in this city. Restaurants, event planning companies, hospitality services. I am always in need of reliable professional staff who can handle high-end clientele. You're offering me a job? I am offering you employment that pays well, provides security, and ensures that you never have to worry about men like Blackstone again. Jessica stared at him, trying to understand the catch. Why would you do that for someone you just met? Because you remind me of someone very important to me. Because I believe good people deserve opportunities to build better lives. And because I think you would be very good at the work I have in mind. What kind of work? Event coordination for my restaurants and private clients. You would manage service staff, coordinate with caterers, ensure that events run smoothly. It would use the skills you already have, but in an environment where your safety and dignity are guaranteed. The offer sounded too good to be true, which immediately made Jessica suspicious. Mr. Santangelo, I appreciate what you did tonight, but I don't know anything about you. For all I know, you could be just as dangerous as Blackstone, just better at hiding it. Lorenzo nodded approvingly. That is exactly the right question to ask. You should never trust offers that seem too generous, especially from men you do not know. He pulled out his phone and showed Jessica the screen. This is the website for Santangelo Hospitality. You can research the company, read reviews, speak to current employees. I am not asking you to trust me blindly. I am asking you to investigate the opportunity and decide for yourself. Jessica looked at the professional website, noting the addresses of multiple high-end establishments throughout the city. Take the weekend to think about it, Lorenzo continued. If you decide you are interested, call the number on the website and ask to speak to Maria Santangelo, my sister. She manages human resources and can answer any questions about the position. Lorenzo handed Jessica a business card. then reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "This is your pay for tonight, plus a bonus for the trauma you experienced. Consider it compensation for Blackstone's behavior." Jessica opened the envelope and gasped. There was more money inside than she would normally make in 2 months. "I can't accept this." "Yes, you can. And you should. You have a daughter to take care of, and that responsibility is more important than pride." The way Lorenzo said it, matter of fact, without condescension, made Jessica realize he understood financial desperation in a way that wealthy men usually didn't. "Mr. Santangelo, Lorenzo, I don't understand why you're being so generous to a stranger." Lorenzo's expression grew distant for a moment, as if he was remembering something painful. "When I was young, my mother worked multiple jobs to support my sister and me after my father died. She was beautiful, desperate, and completely vulnerable to men who saw those qualities as opportunities to exploit. She was not always as fortunate as you were tonight." The simple statement carried a weight of history and pain that made Jessica's heart ache. "I am sorry," she said. "It was a long time ago. But it taught me that protecting women who cannot protect themselves is not charity. It is responsibility." Lorenzo stood, adjusting his jacket with the kind of practiced elegance that suggested expensive habits. "Think about my offer, Jessica. And in the meantime, please be careful about the events you work. Men like Blackstone are not uncommon in these circles." As Lorenzo turned to leave, Jessica felt a sudden panic at the thought of him disappearing from her life. "Wait," she called. "How do I know you're not too good to be true?" Lorenzo smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. "You do not know, but tomorrow you can call Maria and ask her to tell you about the other single mothers who work for our company. Ask them about their experiences, their safety, their job satisfaction. Then decide for yourself." After Lorenzo left, Jessica finished her shift in a daze, constantly replaying the events of the evening. She had come close to being drugged and assaulted by a man who thought his wealth entitled him to her body, then been rescued by another powerful man who seemed genuinely interested in helping her build a better life. The next morning, Jessica sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, researching everything she could find about Lorenzo Santangelo and his businesses. What she discovered was fascinating and slightly concerning. Santangelo Hospitality was indeed a legitimate company with excellent reviews and multiple successful establishments. Lorenzo himself was mentioned in several business publications as a successful entrepreneur with interests in restaurants, real estate, and event planning. But there were also hints of something deeper, references to old-school business practices and traditional family values that suggested connections beyond normal corporate activities. Jessica called the number on the business card and asked to speak with Maria Santangelo. "You must be Jessica," Maria said warmly when she came to the phone. "Lorenzo told me you might call. He said you had a difficult experience last night." "Yes, that's right. He offered me a job, but I wanted to learn more about the company before making any decisions." "Of course. Why don't you come in this afternoon? I can give you a tour of our main restaurant and introduce you to some of our staff. Many of them are women with situations similar to yours." That afternoon, Jessica took Emma to the playground and then traveled to Little Italy for her meeting with Maria Santangelo. The neighborhood was different from anywhere Jessica had spent time before. Older, more traditional, with family restaurants and shops that looked like they had been there for generations. Santangelo's was located in a beautiful old building that had clearly been restored with care and significant expense. The restaurant was elegant but warm, with the kind of atmosphere that suggested genuine hospitality rather than pretentious showmanship. Maria Santangelo was in her mid-30s, with the same dark hair and intelligent eyes as her brother, but with a warmth that was immediately reassuring. She greeted Jessica like an old friend and introduced her to several staff members who were eager to share their experiences working for the Santangelo family. "I was a single mother working 3 different catering jobs when Lorenzo hired me," explained Carmen, a woman about Jessica's age who now managed events for the restaurant. "I was exhausted, barely making rent, Constantly worried about my son's safety when I had to work late shifts. Now I have steady hours, good pay, health insurance, and I never have to worry about inappropriate behavior from clients." "How does he ensure that?" Jessica asked. "By making it very clear that his employees are under his protection," said another woman named Rosa. "Word gets around quickly in certain circles. When people know you work for Lorenzo Santangelo, they treat you with respect." "What does that mean exactly?" Maria stepped in to answer. "My brother has significant influence in this city's business community. People who mistreat his employees tend to find that their own business relationships become complicated." Jessica sensed there was more to the story, but she also noticed that every woman she spoke to seemed genuinely happy, confident, and well-treated. Whatever Lorenzo's methods, they seemed to be effective at protecting his staff. "Jessica," Maria said as they concluded the tour, "I want to be honest with you about my brother. He is a good man who takes care of people who work for him, but his business relationships extend beyond normal corporate networks. Some people find that concerning." "Are you saying he's involved in illegal activities?" "I am saying that he operates according to principles that prioritize loyalty, family, and community over strict legal definitions. Whether that makes him someone you want to work for is a decision only you can make." Jessica went home that evening with a lot to think about. The job offer was everything she needed: good pay, regular hours, safety, benefits, and the kind of career development she had been hoping for. But it also meant accepting employment from a man whose power clearly extended into areas she didn't fully understand. That night, as Jessica tucked Emma into bed, her daughter asked about her day. "Mommy, why do you look worried?" "I'm thinking about a new job, sweetheart. It would be good for us, but it's a big decision." "Would we have more money?" "Yes, we would." "And would you be home more?" "Yes, I think I would be." "Then it sounds like a good job, Mommy." The simple logic of a 5-year-old cut through all of Jessica's complicated concerns. She needed steady work, good pay, and security. Lorenzo was offering all of those things, and his reasons, whatever they might be, were less important than the results. The next morning, Jessica called Maria and accepted the position. Her first day at Santangelo's was unlike any work experience she had ever had. Maria spent hours training her on the company's systems and standards, introducing her to vendors and clients, and explaining the philosophy behind their service approach. "We treat every event like it is for our own family," Maria explained. "That means attention to detail, genuine hospitality, and absolute discretion." Discretion? Many of our clients value privacy. They trust us to provide excellent service without gossip or publicity about their personal affairs. Jessica soon learned that Santangelo's clientele included politicians, celebrities, business leaders, and others who preferred to keep their private events away from public scrutiny. The work was challenging and required a level of sophistication she had never developed in her previous jobs, but it was also fascinating and well compensated. More importantly, Jessica felt safer and more respected than she ever had in any workplace. Lorenzo's influence was subtle, but unmistakable. Clients treated staff with courtesy. There were never inappropriate advances or uncomfortable situations, and everyone understood that Santangelo employees were not to be taken advantage of. Jessica had been working at the restaurant for 3 weeks when she had her first real conversation with Lorenzo since the night he had saved her. He appeared at the restaurant during a busy dinner service, moving through the dining room with the kind of natural authority that made staff members straighten their postures and guests nod respectfully. "Jessica," he said, approaching her station near the private dining rooms. "How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you. Maria has been wonderful, and the work is exactly what I hoped it would be." "And Emma? She is adjusting well to your new schedule?" Jessica was surprised that he remembered her daughter's name. "Yes, she loves that I'm home for dinner most nights now." "Good. Children need their mothers present, not constantly worried about money and safety." There was something in the way Lorenzo said it that suggested personal experience, and Jessica remembered his story about his own mother's struggles. "Mr. Santangelo? Lorenzo, please. Lorenzo, I wanted to thank you again for what you did that night, and for this opportunity. It's changed our lives." Lorenzo's expression softened. "You deserve stability, Jessica. You work hard, you care for your daughter, you treat people with kindness. Those qualities should be rewarded, not exploited. I keep wondering why you helped me. I mean, the real reason." Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. "When I saw what Blackstone was doing to you, I saw my mother 30 years ago. A beautiful, hard-working woman being preyed upon by a man who thought his money entitled him to whatever he wanted. What happened to her? She survived, but barely. And she spent the rest of her life making sure that my sister and I understood the difference between power used to protect and power used to exploit." Jessica studied Lorenzo's face, seeing pain and determination in equal measure. "Is that why you do what you do? Protect people?" "It is part of it, yes. My family has resources, influence, connections that can make life better or worse for people in this community. I choose to use those resources to protect rather than prey." "Even when it's dangerous?" "Everything worthwhile is dangerous, cara mia. The question is whether the risk serves a good purpose." Over the following months, Jessica's life improved in ways she had never imagined possible. Her work at Santangelo's was challenging and rewarding, allowing her to use skills she had developed while learning new ones. Her financial situation stabilized to the point where she could afford a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, and Emma was thriving in a new school that actually had resources for its students. More importantly, Jessica felt like she belonged somewhere for the first time since Emma's father had left. The Santangelo family businesses were exactly that. Family operations where employees were treated like extended relatives, where personal problems were addressed collectively, where success was shared and difficulties were supported. Jessica also found herself developing feelings for Lorenzo that went beyond gratitude and professional respect. He was unlike any man she had ever met. Powerful but gentle, commanding but respectful, dangerous but protective. When he visited the restaurant, he always made time to ask about Emma, to inquire about Jessica's goals and dreams, to offer advice or assistance without being condescending. The attraction was clearly mutual. Jessica caught Lorenzo watching her with an intensity that had nothing to do with business, and their conversations gradually became more personal, more intimate, more charged with possibility. The turning point came on a Friday evening when Jessica was working late to coordinate a weekend wedding reception. Most of the staff had gone home, and Jessica was alone in the restaurant reviewing final details when she heard someone enter through the private entrance Lorenzo used. "Jessica, you should not be here so late by yourself." Jessica looked up to see Lorenzo approaching, his expression concerned. "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect for tomorrow's event. It's the first wedding I've coordinated entirely myself. And I am sure it will be beautiful. But it is past 10 o'clock, and you have a daughter waiting at home. Actually, Emma is having a sleepover at her friend's house tonight. I thought it would be a good opportunity to catch up on work." Lorenzo studied her face in the soft restaurant lighting. "You work too hard, cara mia," says the man who owns multiple businesses and probably works 18-hour days. "That is different. I do not have a small child depending on me." "No, but you have dozens of employees depending on you. Hundreds of people who look to you for protection and support." Lorenzo smiled at that. "You see too much, Jessica Parker. I see a man who carries more responsibility than anyone should have to carry alone." They stood looking at each other across the empty restaurant, the air between them charged with months of growing attraction and unspoken feelings. "Jessica," Lorenzo said quietly, "there are things about my life, my business, my responsibilities that make relationships complicated. I know. Do you? Do you really understand what it means to care for someone in my position?" Jessica set down her planning materials and moved closer to Lorenzo. I understand that you saved my life. I understand that you've given me and my daughter security we never had before. I understand that you're the first man I've ever met who makes me feel both safe and alive at the same time. Lorenzo's dark eyes searched her face. And what about the danger? What about the moral complications? What about the fact that my world operates by rules that most people find unacceptable? What about the fact that your rules include protecting single mothers from predators? What about the fact that your power is used to help people instead of harm them? What about the fact that you've shown me more respect and kindness than any man ever has? Lorenzo stepped closer, close enough that Jessica could smell his cologne, could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. You do not know everything about my life, Jessica. I know enough. I know you're a good man who makes difficult choices for the right reasons. And if those choices sometimes involve violence, if the methods I use to protect people are not always legal or conventional. Jessica thought about Blackstone, about the terror in his eyes when Lorenzo had confronted him, about the immediate way he had backed down and disappeared from her life forever. Then I'm grateful that someone is willing to make those choices and use those methods to keep people like me and Emma safe. Lorenzo cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle, despite the calluses that spoke of a more physical life than his business suit suggested. You could have any man, Jessica. Someone clean, conventional, safe. I don't want any man. I want you. When Lorenzo kissed her, it was with a passion that had been building for months, a connection that went beyond attraction to something deeper and more powerful. Jessica felt like she was finally, completely home. 6 months later, Jessica moved into Lorenzo's penthouse apartment with Emma, who had been completely charmed by the man she called Mr. Lorenzo, and his promises to teach her to cook real Italian food. The apartment was transformed by their presence. Children's drawings on the refrigerator, toys in the living room, the sounds of a family where there had once been only elegant solitude. Jessica had learned more about Lorenzo's business interests, understanding that his influence extended into areas that weren't always strictly legal, but were always directed toward protecting and supporting his community. She had met other families connected to the Santangelo organization, seen the network of mutual support and loyalty that formed the backbone of Lorenzo's world. Most importantly, she had seen how Lorenzo interacted with Emma, patient, gentle, genuinely interested in her thoughts and dreams. He attended school events, helped with homework, and treated Jessica's daughter with the kind of respect and affection that suggested he saw her as family, not just an accessory to his relationship with Jessica. Do you ever regret it? Lorenzo asked one evening, as they stood on the balcony of their apartment, watching Emma play in the secured garden below while Maria supervised. Regret what? Choosing this life. Choosing me. All the complications that come with being part of my world. Jessica looked at the man who had saved her from assault, given her meaningful work, provided security for her daughter, and loved them both with a devotion that never wavered. I regret that it took me so long to find you, Jessica said simply. Lorenzo pulled her closer, his arms strong and warm around her. Ti amo, Jessica Parker. You and Emma, you are my heart. Ti amo anch'io, Jessica replied, proud of the Italian phrases Maria had been teaching her. As they stood together watching Emma play safely in their garden, Jessica thought about that night at Romano's when she had been seconds away from drinking poisoned champagne. She had thought she was working just another catering event, earning money to pay rent and buy groceries. Instead, she had found a protector, a partner, a father for her daughter, and a love that was stronger than any danger they might face together. That's the story of Jessica Parker, the single mother who was saved by 2 words from an Italian Mafia boss who saw a predator targeting an innocent woman and decided to intervene. Her story proves that protection can come from unexpected sources, that love can grow from the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is exactly the hero you need. Jessica and Lorenzo's love story reminds us that strength comes in many forms, that family can be chosen as well as born, and that real love is about respect, protection, and partnership rather than control or possession. If this incredible story moved you, and you want to hear more amazing tales of unexpected protection, dangerous romance, and love that conquers all obstacles, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people who discovered that heroes come in all forms, and that sometimes the most meaningful relationships begin with the most dangerous moments. What did you think of Jessica and Lorenzo's story? Have you ever been in a situation where a stranger protected you from danger? Would you have accepted Lorenzo's job offer? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories resonate with your own experiences of unexpected kindness, protection, and love. Remember, sometimes the person who saves you is someone you never expected to trust, and sometimes the most dangerous choice leads to the safest love. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.